Perfect. We've already got questions rolling in, so I'll let you get started. We'll get to those after. But so everybody knows, my name is Kyle Flynn. I am an account manager here at voices.com. I handle a lot of the coaches there as well as the platinum talent on our site. This is our coach, Rachel, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Oh. Hi there, I'm Rachel Alena, voice actress, voice acting coach. It's my absolute pleasure to be here with you today. Shall I begin?
Yeah, you can kick right into it then.
All right, so today we're going to talk about standing out in e-learnings and audiobook narration and how to kind of be a winner in that environment. The question always becomes, why do I want to do that? And before I start, let me just say this. My goal is to be as helpful to you as I can as a coach and a participant here in this webinar. So I want to give you information that can be helpful for you to grow yourself as a voiceover talent however you want that to be. So let me just say that from the very beginning. So I'm here to answer questions in the end and try to be as helpful as I can be. So why e-learnings and audiobook narration? Well, there are all kinds of different voice acting things that you can do. You can do commercial work, you can do animation work. Those things are all awesome. And a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today transfers into that environment. Okay. Commercial work, you can make big hit money, right? So that's the awesome thing about that. It's a very competitive environment though. E-learnings and audiobook narration is an environment where you may get more of a gig-based type of a pay. However, you can gain long-term work and really have a nice career, you know, even making a six-figure income as a voice actress in that environment. The key is gaining long-term clients. Of course, the question becomes, how do you get past the auditions in order to gain those long-term clients? And we'll talk about that. I like to think of e-learnings and audiobook narration as whales. Whales, a very good friend of mine taught me this. Whales are little tiny jobs that can turn into big jobs, right? So they start out as little things and you may not have an expectation of them becoming a big e-learning project that you're going to be doing for a long period of time. However, that's often how these things start out. So here's an example. In 2016, did a job for a client where it was just a one-off on a pay-to-play site, just like voices.com, same kind of idea, did a job, they hired me back for about 5 jobs. Next thing you know, they referred me to another production house. No big deal, took those jobs, you know, I was obviously turning my work in on time, not hassling the client, looking at the perspective, and we're going to talk about this, that it is about them, not me as the voiceover talent. It's about them as a client. Anyway, they wound up, that second client that I wound up working for, that production house, needing somebody to do some trainings for Microsoft. I auditioned, got the role, and didn't realize that it was going to be such a whale. Turned out to be, they were creating new trainings for the recruiting department at Microsoft. That turned out to be, I think, about a year and 6 months of a project, sometimes had me working 13 hours a day. That's an example of a little job turning into a big job. And how I landed that was from a little job way, way, way back when, probably a year and a half prior, where I did a little audition. It turned into another thing, which turned into another thing, which turned into a big thing, which turned into a project that, and we'll talk about this later, I had to really change who I was as a voice actress in order to sustain that career in e-learning. And there's a myth about that, a myth about e-learnings where we think that it's just going to be, oh, I do trainings, I'm good at this, and that's all that it's going to be. And it's not like that. This is, we'll talk about that as we go forward, but e-learnings and audiobooks, great long-term work. Even if you get like a little book deal, I've had about 3, you can get books that are roaming around and coming back in the background in addition to everything else. Talk about a way to cut your teeth and become a really good voiceover talent. Get a little audiobook deal. Then you've got that rolling. And I'll answer some questions about that too, if you have any. Anyway, the pay's pretty good. Not as good as commercial work, obviously. The deal with commercial work is big hits, big money, royalties potentially. But in this environment, it's more of a per word thing or an hourly thing where you get good pay. It's more hourly, how much work you do, how long you keep the clients and that sort of thing, and then you get your payback. There's also notoriety. You know, a lot of the companies that I've worked for, I've done a ton of e-learnings for. But when I put up my resume, I've done a lot of commercial work, but when I put up my resume, nobody's going to ask me, oh, exactly what did you do for the Gap? You know, I've done trainings, but it's internal and it counts as something that I've got experience with. Okay, so that's kind of the beauty of e-learnings. So now let me answer. I know you all have this big question, right? What makes one voice talent better than another? And I'm going to tell you something right now that might be a little bit different than what you think about, but it is voice acting, not voice reading. That's just the way that it goes. It is not like you get a script and you're like, woohoo, I can do training. So I'm going to go from a corporate world of training, go in and train e-learnings as a voiceover talent. That's a wonderful way to start. And I know a lot of people start that way, getting into e-learnings and even starting to dip their toes into voice acting. That's awesome. But the deal is you have to understand script analysis, and you have to understand what I call adaptive paralinguistics, which are your word emphasis, your pitch, your tone, your cadence. All of that stuff comes into play in e-learnings beyond just being able to read technical material. So I want to kind of dispel that myth right out of the gate here. So then that brings me to the next thing, which is, and this is totally counterintuitive, just because it doesn't feel right doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's the opposite. It's kind of like opposite land of the way that life is, right? Usually if something doesn't feel good, we're like, ooh, that's not quite in my wheelhouse. I'm not going to do that. Voice acting and moving in different genres is a little different than that. You can start out and you can work forever as a voice actor who does one lane. You just hop in that lane where you're comfortable, you do those trainings, and you could be the voice of Microsoft. But I'm going to kind of explain to you a little story here. Let me grab the script here. So when I first did that job for Microsoft, I, for about probably a year, got my scripts with my name on the top, and I read it something like this. The first two columns of the Sure Deposit tab will show how many enrollments and the number of Sure Deposit claims the community had during the reporting month. If your community is on CCD Recovery Services, any claims they submit on the community's behalf will be shown. Typical voice acting voice. Awesome. Sounds smooth, easy to listen to. Get a lot of jobs that way, right? That's awesome. So at about a little over a year, I got an email with somebody else's name on the top. Something like Lynn. It began with an L. I don't quite remember what the name was. But I called my contact and said, hey, what's up? Why is Lynn's name on this and not mine? And she said, oh, we're moving into the colleges. So now we want to train the recruiting department in colleges, so we need a younger voice. Okay, remember, this was my whale. This was not Lynn's whale. In my mind, I'm like, wait a second. I don't want Lynn to take this from me. So I went back to my client and said, can I audition for the role? She said, sure. At the time, I was kind of traveling more in one lane, kind of that lane you just heard, very comfortable voice actory lane. I went and kind of studied what that might look like and came back with a voice. And I wound up landing the job and went something like this. I'm not saying it's an improvement. I'm just saying that you have to realize that what the client wants is what's going to connect with their employees or the people they're looking for. So here goes, something like this. The first two columns of the Sure Deposit tab will show how many enrollments and the number of Sure Deposit claims the community had during the reporting month. If your community is on CCD Recovery Services, any claims they submit on the community's behalf will be shown. Okay, totally different voice, right? And the situation then became a situation where I had to do that voice, sometimes 13 hours a day, you know, just processing it and doing my other jobs and everything. So it wasn't all Microsoft, but I had to do that for a large period of time. Super uncomfortable. It is not who I am. It is not that smooth, fun, expressive voice acting type of voice that I enjoyed. However, the deal was that's what they wanted. So I actually, believe it or not, cried a little bit. I struggled through it. It was very uncomfortable, but in the end, I use that voice all the time. I did it for Old Navy, Banana Republic, The Gap, all kinds of training, Schnucks Groceries, using that voice because I could do it. And so what I'm expressing to you right now is get uncomfortable. That's the one thing that I will say. I know you might not know which direction is the right direction, but don't put yourself, please, in one lane. Get uncomfortable. We'll talk about this, but look at what your client wants and then move in that direction. Okay, so let's kind of go on to the next topic. What makes them want to hire you? On a site like voices.com, which is an awesome site as a part of your plan to grow your career, you are up against a lot of people. There's a lot of people, sorry to say it, that probably sound like you. So you have to figure out, if the person's listening to 50 people, how am I going to be better than person number 49 if I'm person number 50? And I want to kind of help you through that, talking about some script analyzation, and then we will go through some actual script work, but some script analyzation to kind of get an understanding of how that goes. Okay, from the very beginning, from now on, when you get a script, please, 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 please. I know it's a numbers game, and I know you have to get things done quickly in order to get enough auditions in. Do not start reading and auditioning. Take a step. Ask, who or what are you selling? Who cares? And what size is it? It is not all one size fits all. So let's talk about who and what are you selling. This is particularly important in commercial work and in e-learning work. In audiobook work, it's a little bit different. We'll talk about that. So always, if you're able, and I know this isn't always an option when you're doing your auditions, to know who the client is, Google them. Take a quick Google search in advance. If you don't know who the client is, but you understand the content in the topic, Google that topic. So you understand the acronyms, you understand what they're talking about. I did an on-camera job locally here for a wastewater plant about a month ago, and it was half on camera and half voice acting work. So we did both. I wore a blazer with their exact colors that was in their logo. And they mentioned it when I was there. And it's not rocket science. I just went online, Googled them in advance so that when I went in there, I wanted to represent their brand. I can't express enough how much clients think this is so important. When you're in one lane and you're going, I am a voiceover talent and I am doing e-learnings that are professional, that might not be what the client wants. And so I ask you to look, you might be wanting to go internal for Taco Bell, and you might be reading it like that when you should go and look at what their brand is, because they may want all of their branding, including their internal trainings on their open enrollment manual, to be within that style. And then next, pretend you work there. Pretend that you are an independent contractor that works for that company. So as their work comes out, you anticipate that they're going to be doing some upcoming work, and you're prepared for repeating what you did before. And a tip on that would be, I don't know if you notice my microphone behind me. I know a lot of people have studios in your closet, totally cool. However, if you're able to have the same setup, we can kind of have your interface or whatever your mixing processor is be set kind of at the same thing. This way, they're going to call you back. For example, I had been doing the open enrollments for Alliance Residential since 2016. I did them, I think it was 2016 to 2020. Those guys would just call me back to be like, oh, it's in 2016 you did them, but we have new verbiage. So can you redo this verbiage? What would I do? Pull up their 2015, make sure my sound matched exactly, because everything's pretty much, if you can do it in the same space, and then match it so you can just plug in. That's how you become the voice of a company. It's easy for them. It's like I work there. They just kind of, I work from home, but I work there. They just kind of call me up and I fill in for their particular brand. And you can even make a chart, which has, and I have done this for a long time, the style that the client is looking for, the style, like a lot of times you'll work for production companies. A lot of the people that hire you here on voices.com might work for a bigger company that does a lot of smaller e-learnings or e-learnings for different clients. You can be like, here's the name of the production company, and here's the name of the jobs that I did for this client. And here are, like, let's just say I did a job for H&M. Okay, H&M wants this style, and it's named my file is named this, and you can go look it up so that you have quick recall so you can become the voice of that company. That's what they want. They just want it to be easy. You have to remember there's people on the other end doing a job who might need some help with that job. The next question is, of course, what are you selling? In voice acting, you're always selling something. And even in audiobooks, you're selling whatever it is that author, if you've got the queen of horror, I've worked with her, I've coached the queen of horror. She is selling her type of horror. So you need to understand, what is her type of horror? How am I going to do those character voices that fit within the type of voice that she would put with that character? You know, if you're doing an audiobook where you're talking about meditation, check out what you're selling, because you might not just be saying, today we're going to be Zen. It might be a food / salsa dancing meditation retreat. And that's a different vibe. And so you want to kind of look at what you're selling. I will tell you, most of the time you are selling really two things. They're kind of in different spots on this list: your client brand and that you're a model employee. That's often the case in these trainings. A lot of times you're not just talking about ink. I did a job talking about ink. I don't know anything about ink, but I'm training people on how ink is, you know, put into the machine. And I guess it's called RPIs and different numbers and all this stuff. What am I selling? I'm selling the joy of ink, right? The product that they've got. I'm selling the client brand in whatever style that is, selling how to be a model employee working in this printing press. Another thing that you're often selling in e-learnings is internal things like the human resourcing department. For example, when I said that I was doing the open enrollment for Alliance Residential, yes, I'm teaching people about open enrollment, but really what I'm selling is how great the open enrollment is at Alliance Residential and that it's a great place to work. So you kind of want to look at it from a more holistic perspective versus just picking up a script and just reading it. Or an outsourced insurance company, which is, again, that may seem like you're just giving information about your insurance benefits from an outsourced resource, but actually, again, you're selling your client information. And you're selling your company of how great they are to have this outsourced insurance company. So that's something to really kind of think about. And the next thing that I think about is, who cares, right? This goes back to what I said in the first place. Don't pick up a script and just read it. Think about who cares. And when I talk about who cares, I talk about the human element of who cares. So for example, when I narrated for The Gap, right? I did their internal trainings for a year in that youthful voice, teaching people who are probably, I assume, maybe 18 years old to 25 years old. That would probably be my target. Not to say that there's not older people who do this, but I was teaching them how to color code the clothes and put them on the rack, and how to handle customers, how to handle angry customers, all kinds of different things like that. I could look at it from a one-dimensional perspective and be like, I am selling, was it The Gap? I did Gap and Old Navy, but let's just say, okay, I am selling Old Navy, and that's what I'm selling. And I'm selling how to color code, and I'm selling how to upsell. No, what I'm actually selling, that stuff's important, absolutely. But I'm selling how to keep your job. I'm selling how to be kind to your fellow employees. I'm selling how to behave in our environment towards customers. Back in that ink example, I am selling how to maybe support your family and feed your family. That's what I'm doing. So as a voiceover talent, you can be one-dimensional and just sell or just talk about whatever's on the script. But I implore you to think about the human element of who's on the other side. That is always going to win for you, because it's a human-to-human connection, even in the e-learnings and even in the audiobook narrations that we're talking about, that is going to make a difference. They do not want a robot. Nobody wants a robot. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So voice acting for e-learnings is not one size fits all. And I think this is a little bit of a myth that I'd like to dispel. We talked about this quite some time ago when I did a mission audition on e-learning. A lot of times people will get something that says corporate professional, and let me pick something else up to read here. They'll read it, well, I can use this. They'll read it like, hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a voice talent representing this company, and I am professional. Or even, hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a voice talent representing this company, and I am professionally talking to you today about ink. That's not what they want, most likely. Occasionally it is, but for the most part, they want somebody that sounds a little bit more relatable. Corporate professional in e-learnings is something like this. Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a voice talent representing this company, and I'm going to talk to you about our fantastic product. If they want, because this is, I'm answering this question because I know I'm going to get a lot of it. Everybody always says, what's the deal with the different types of styles people are looking for? So I want to give you examples so you kind of know where you want to fit in there. They're looking for corporate casual. That might be more like this. Hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm a voice talent representing this company, but I'm not super stressed about it. Like, I'm pretty much cash, kind of like you, but they hired me in, so we're all good and in this together. Okay, now if they're looking for internal professional, that is a different thing, and I want you to recognize that. Internal professional is different than corporate professional. Internal professional, and this is happening more and more because we live in a society right now that's moving in a very all-inclusive direction, and voice acting mimics what's going on in society. So an internal professional might be more like this. Hi, I'm Rachel, and I am an employee who works here. I have such a good voice, but you don't know I'm a voice talent. I just work here and I have a good voice. They brought me up from the mailroom and you'll never know, right? So that's kind of internal professional. Let me just scooch this out of the way so I can see what I have here. The last category is internal employee. I recently just did this. I just finished a 7,000 word job 2 weeks ago for a government agency. Again, started out little guy. I did 3 little guys for them months ago, and then they brought me in on the 7,000 word whale that I just finished. This is an example of paying attention to those auditions in e-learnings and audiobooks when you go and look. They asked me to do internal professional. They said, we want you to sound professional like you work for the company. So I turned back what you heard before, that internal professional voice, and I missed the mark. They sent, I always send a sample in. They sent a sample back to me and said, that's not what we want. We want you to sound like an internal doctor who works here, and we don't want anybody to know that you're a hired voiceover talent. And that happens all the time. If you're able to pull that off, that's some gold, because that's something that these production companies have a hard time finding, because people really enjoy doing that smooth, slick voice. And so that's something, I'll give you 2 examples because there's 2 different ways where you can do that a little bit more like, hi, I'm Rachel. I fooled you. You know, I am a voice talent, but you have no idea because I'm rough. You can't even tell because I'm kind of choppy and I'm off, but I'm totally giving you the information, so we're good here. Or if it's for a younger crowd, lift it. Hi, I'm Rachel. I totally work here. We are friends. I saw you at lunch, and you don't even know that I'm a voiceover talent, and I'm the voice of your company. I've been here for 12 years. It's awesome. So those are some examples of different styles that you want to do as a voiceover talent. So to kind of, I think we're getting close to our time here. To recap, there is a human on the other end of all of this. Of course, there's a human who hires you. Often it's a production company or it's somebody internal who has a responsibility to get a job done that sounds like the brand of their client. That's the first thing. So that's the thing that's going to make you stand out, is understanding the brand and being able to be a bit of a voice shapeshifter, if you can, to move in the direction of what they're looking for. And the second thing to keep in mind is there's a person on the other end. And I cannot stress this enough. I cannot tell you how much over-articulation and over-rigidness you find when people are looking to audition for corporate professional, or what they think is an e-learning or a training or industrial work or web-based work or nonfiction audiobooks, where it's like this rigid, like, bah, 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 bah. That's not what they want. They want a person who sounds professional, who, in today's market anyway, who sounds like it's somebody that they can relate to and connect to and believe. So there you go.
That was really great. I love all the there. I mean, you really dove in and gave some great examples. So yeah, definitely thank you very much for going through all that information. I know many people in the audience, have some questions. Guys, we are moving into kind of the Q&A part of the webinar. So if you guys want to go ahead and ask any questions there in the Q&A section, then Rachel will be kind enough to go through and kind of answer one by one. Now, if there are any questions that we don't get to, I know that Rachel would be happy to answer those for you still.
Sure.
Would have to reach out to her personally at, where's the best spot to reach you, Rachel?
Email is the best. My email address, well, I'll give you my website first. It's rachelalena.com. That's the best place to go. There's a contact form on there that gives you information. My direct email is rachel@bigbitestudio.com, BIGBITE studio.com. Either one is a great place to reach out to me. Just know it might take me a little bit to reply to you. That does happen.
Especially with this overwhelming amount of questions that might be coming.
Correct. Well, just in general. So that's generally the deal. So yes, I get your message. I just might take me a little bit to reply. Yeah.
Perfect. And just for anybody that was asking, I saw it was asked once in the Q&A section. This recording will be passed out to everybody probably about 24 hours after we end today. So you guys can look for that in your inboxes. It will be a link, and that way you guys can use this at your own disposal and make sure that you guys are, soaking in all the information that you want. So now we will go to the Q&A section here. Just give me 2 seconds and we can get rolling on that. So the first question here is from Robert. I know, I've done 3 audiobooks and love, but it's been quite time consuming. So I'm looking for techniques that you may use to make the process as efficient as possible.
Okay.
What processes do you use, Rachel?
Pardon me?
What processes do you use to help make things a little bit more efficient?
Well, first of all, I hope you're using punch and roll. Punch and roll is at the bottom of your, Kyle, you're shaking your head. You probably know about this.
Yep.
When you hit the play button, excuse me, on most of your applications, it's an ability to be able to kind of listen to a little bit of the pre-roll before you go in and do your auditions. I think that's a lifesaver. Another thing that's really important is, what is your vocal technique? And this is something that I think gets lost often. First of all, are you using your diaphragm to take nice big breaths? I wonder if you can see me if I back up onto the mic here. Let me back up and see if you can see me. You're able to take a nice deep breath, and over after you get through a paragraph, go off your mic, take your breath, and come back in. That will save you from a little bit of editing down your breaths, because they just won't be as loud, and they may be even itty bitty breaths that you won't even have to take out because they're not so imposing. And also taking cheap breaths within. I use a product called, I'll show it to you. I'm not endorsing this product. I'm just telling you about it. I don't know these people. It's on Amazon, but it's called Entertainer's Secret here. And it is like $12.95 on Amazon. It's full of chemicals, but it gets rid of mouth noise. And I know that's a really big problem with these big audiobooks and e-learnings. It says to put it in your nose. I don't recommend it. I always put it in my mouth. Stay hydrated. That's another big thing. And don't have dairy. Don't have dairy I don't have dairy at all, occasionally on the weekends, because when I'm working, it just messes up everything that I'm doing. So that can really, really help. And then the last thing is, and I know everybody has their own opinion about this, I respect it. I am a fan of standing when you're doing these big narrations. And the reason is, you can use your physicality to get above your scripts. So instead of sitting like this where your diaphragm and everything is all squished and you're trying to read into your scripts, if you can use your physicality to be above your scripts, keeps your energy up. And it also allows you the opportunity to use some mic technique. Oh, and by the way, P's out the side of your mouth, and T's and S's, lighten those as well.
Perfect. That is great. And yes, no endorsement of the product, but glad to hear that you found something.
Yeah, no endorsement of the product. I don't know anything about the product other than I use it. Yeah.
But no, that's great information. And yeah, I really like some of the tips. Yeah, hydration is so important. It really is, especially with those mouth noises. So yeah, I'm going to jump into the next question here. Let's see. So Rachel, do you take acting classes yourself, or do you do any additional training?
That's such a great question. I just did an acting class. I did one, was it a week ago or a week and a half ago? I actually did an acting class on, because this is a big thing now with COVID, how to do lighting and handle online auditions, using your remote, like your phone or your iPad or something. But yes, I'm taking piano lessons right now as well. I'm a person that loves to learn. I have a lot of people that come to me who have inspired me to learn, because there's so much that not all of us know. There's somebody else has had that experience. So absolutely, I do. Yeah.
That's awesome. I know a lot of the talent that I work with on the platinum side of things on our site. They live and die by, the fact that you never stop learning in this industry. So keeping your tools sharp and making sure that you're always guns a-blazing is not a bad idea at all.
Well, and can I say one more thing to that point?
Definitely.
Is voice acting changes with society. And that is something to keep in mind. You can be a master at a lane, and that lane turns left, and you have to suddenly change. So if you keep your skills up and have some coaching, especially with people that are relevant with what's going on in the industry, that can be really helpful to combat that.
Definitely. Alrighty. So on to the next question from Kara there. Says, hi, Rachel. What are some tips that you have for sustaining a voice that may not be natural to you? Kind of like you have with the college one that you mentioned. So looking to be more consistent and deliver a predictable read for a client over longer periods of time and larger projects.
Super excellent question. If you have not done any studying with somebody who understands how the voice mechanism works, how to create different sounds, I would suggest that, even if it's a voice teacher who teaches music, because you want to understand how the air comes from your diaphragm and pushes through this area. And there's a little lift here in your soft palate. It's really hard to explain, like in this short session that we have, but there's a little lift here that if you're able to lift up, you can create, I always call it putting an egg in this area. You can create resonance. And what you can do then is use that air and that power and the way in which you formulate your facial structure to sustain. I never ever suggest, and I absolutely say do not do a voice that's going to cause you any pain whatsoever. Just don't do it. It's not worth the job. But there's a lot of different things that you can do using your technique with regards to diaphragmatic breathing and the way in which you formulate your facial structure that can get you through, it's muscle memory, that can get you through that kind of a situation. But I'm happy for you that you're working on that to kind of become more diverse. I think that's awesome.
Definitely great answer there. So funny enough, actually, we have a question from one of your former students, I believe, Steve. Steve said, hi, Rachel. Even after 50 audiobooks, I'm still struggling a bit with having a baritone voice, voicing female characters. Any tips on how not to come off sounding fake, shrill, or just flat out silly?
Yes. Okay, here's my feeling on this, and I adhere to this myself. Do not try to change your pitch to be a female if you're a male. You can up your pitch. You want to feminize the vocal traits. So when I talk about feminize, let me give you an example. I did an audiobook where there were about 7 characters. It was just a 30-minute voice. There was the male lead, I'm not a male, a female who was a very secondary character or third character, and an alien. And the alien and the male were the 2 main characters. What I chose to do was that female who had less of a role, I made her my primary vocal character because I know I'm strong at the female scientist. And I made her very upright like this. So what do I do with that male? With the male, it's not as much about pitch as it is creating a character with vocal traits that make sense. So since I made her, she was a scientist, upright like this, the male lead was a writer who was having a nervous breakdown. So I made his vocal traits opposite. I went low, I added a rasp, and I made him hesitant because that was part of his characteristics. I don't do a great male voice. So you can tell I'm not a male, but I add in a personality trait. And my suggestion for you, Steve, is look at the personality traits for that character and create vocal traits that bring out those characteristics. Do not try to sound like a female, because that's a recipe for disaster. You can still be a more feminine male potentially with the traits. If it's a scientist, go more staccato. If it's a nervous breakdown of an author, maybe draw out the nervous breakdown and the hesitancy. That's my suggestion for that.
Those are some great suggestions there. Really, really well done there. Now we have a question from Marvin, kind of more on the beginner side. What do you recommend for somebody who's just starting out with voiceover and seeking to get into these opportunities?
Wow, that is a gigantic question. My first thing is, do you have a demo? And because it depends on how just starting out you are. Without a demo, that's your resume, and your first demo, in my opinion, is never going to be as strong as your fifth demo, but you have to have some place to start. When you think about it from the perspective of like a buyer who might be buying a voiceover talent, they want to know that you're just not somebody who says, I have a nice voice and I think I can do this, because they have to have they've got their deadlines. They've got their client that's going to need it on their end. So my suggestion for you is, first of all, understand the rules. And if you don't know what the rules are, listen to other voice talent and try to mimic what they're doing, because there are rules, so that you can understand kind of where you fit within the realm of that. Also, and I know there's a gazillion opinions on this, I am a believer in starting out with something where you just cut your teeth. I mean, my second audiobook, my first one was for a best-selling author and somebody else produced it, but so that was really lucky for me. But my second one, I wanted to learn how to produce. I picked up a $50 per finished hour book. It took me, I swear, like 10 to 12 hours to do. And I just cut my teeth on it. And I know it's a low-paying thing, and there's a lot of opinions about that. But by the time I got to my third book, I knew what I was doing, and I had gone through it. And the expectations from the person on the other end, most likely paying me that amount, was like, well, and I did it under a pseudonym even, so that I already had a voice acting career, so people wouldn't know that it was me. But that's my thoughts, is you want to jump in, but I would suggest getting a little bit of training or education, before you put a bunch of money into stuff without really, it's kind of like if you're going to be a hairdresser. I want to be a hairdresser, but you don't just set up a shop. You kind of gather information about how to be a good hairdresser, understand it. Then you go through the school, you kind of cut some hair. Then in this case, you put your demo together, and then you have a place to start.
Perfect. That is great. I know it was kind of a can of worms there, so definitely.
No, that's okay. It's a great question.
Perfect. Yeah, no, appreciate that, and really great answer there. Looking at a question from John here. He mentions when you said peas from the side of your mouth, as a singer, which John is, enunciation is everything, and peas a lot of times have to pop. So how do you recommend, and what do you mean by getting the peas, from the side of your mouth rather than that?
Yeah.
Pop?
So if you can think of it like if I were going to say popcorn, that's a direct p on the mic. And if you were to just kind of tilt to the side, popcorn, it just becomes a habit. Popcorn at the side of your mouth. That's a nice thing to do. You can also back up a little bit. Popcorn, to just kind of have that P be a little bit more pronounced. And that's something, as I'm a trained singer as well, and articulation is a really big thing, and articulation is super important. But as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to be super important. You want to be articulate, but in a casual way. So it's not a problem. It's not a problem. You see how I kind of did that, to just kind of put it off to the side. Same thing with muting T's, and then the S's at the end of your sentences. That can also be a problem. You don't need to do that. You can say sentences, and even though it feels awkward, it'll likely, at least it does for me, come up as a smaller S, and therefore you don't need to reduce it at all.
Perfect. That is a great answer. Yeah, it's something that a lot of people struggle with. So glad that we were able to kind of dive in on that and provide some answers there. So thank you very much for that one. We have a question from Eliza. She is new from the voiceover business, and so far a lot of clients haven't pressed, the like button and got that reciprocation. Is there anything that she should do to, then start moving in the direction where she can, start gaining that client list and really start hopefully taking off in the industry?
Boy, that's a tough question because I haven't heard her, so I don't know specifically what the situation is. I would say when I was growing my career, I did 3.5 hours a day, 4 days a week of auditioning. Pay-to-play sites. I did some other things as well. And I was just consistent. And I would say, and you would probably be better to answer this, but on a site like voices.com, if you get to 100 and you're not getting likes and you're not getting any feedback, you need to reach out to a coach because something is probably going on. I know with people that I work with, sometimes I had a woman who got to 100, didn't get anything. She didn't have a demo, but she was on voices.com, but she's came back to me and said, I didn't land anything. Then suddenly she landed 5 within like a week and was overwhelmed with work. So that does happen. But if you're not getting likes and you're not landing things after you've done 100, something's going on that you probably need some one-on-one discussion to address. Because remember, although you want to sound like a natural person, you also want to sound like a voiceover talent sometimes who's being a natural person, or understand how to sound like a natural person within the realm of voice acting. And that's not always intuitive. So I wish I had a better answer, but since I haven't heard her, I don't know.
Definitely. And I would really kind of agree with a lot of Rachel's points there. There's certain things that, without hearing that person, it's very hard to determine. So, that's where coaching is really great. So definitely feel free to reach out to Rachel here. That's probably your best place to start. We have a very good one from Anna, sorry if I mispronounced your name there. Aspirational. How do you interpret that spec and deliver it in your reads?
Oh my gosh, aspirational. Well, so you can interpret something one way, and that can have nothing to do with the way they want it read, because everybody has their own perspective and the way we see things. So my answer here might be 100% wrong. For me, if somebody said aspirational, I would either or do it 2 ways. The first would be to add emotion behind what I'm talking about by using pitch, cadence, tone, and those sorts of things to express that emotion, to bring forward my script. And I might do that. This is where I say you're not exactly sure. You might want to do that in a dramatic way, which might be like, and then the babies were born. You might want, I don't know if that's what the client's looking for. This is where checking out their brand, if you're able to do that, it might be more like, and then the babies were born. I mean, you don't know, but I would say it's something that moves somebody. That's what I would say that they're hoping for. The challenge becomes what the director is looking for, or the production house or whatever, or the client is what moves them, and you don't always know where they're coming from. So the best thing that you can do is kind of make it lifty in what you think is going to work and see where it falls.
Perfect. And that is, you're spot on again there. But again, it's just something that it totally depends on a case-by-case basis a lot of times. So you got to get a good feel for that client and what you think that, they're trying to interpret with that.
Right. And sometimes you can't send 2 takes. I think you can say, there are 2 takes in this, and do it in 2 different ways. That's another option. Sometimes people listen to 2 takes and sometimes they don't. So that's something else that you could do in that way.
Definitely. So we have a great question from Regan here. What would you recommend for medical e-learnings? I was thinking of taking a medical technology course to become more familiar with terms and proper pronunciations. Do you have any advice on this?
Sure. I do a lot of medical narration work, which is insane because I don't know much about it. What I do is, and I think that's an excellent idea, excellent understanding the terminology. I go to dictionary.com. So here's the deal. If you're focusing on medical, then you're going to wind up with clients that give you that without the pronunciation. If you work for production houses, as I generally do, they actually give you either a key or they kind of give you the phonetic pronunciation of it, so you kind of have that in advance. I think you'd be a much quicker recall if you did take a class. I go to dictionary.com and put the auditory listening on so that I can hear how that is. And sometimes the words aren't there. I have actually called hospitals before and asked them how to pronounce words. So I think taking a medical course is a great way to go. And I think there's a lot of work in that field and some really great long-term work. And I will say about the medical work, one thing that I really like about that is from a competition as far as voice acting goes, back to this, how do you stand out? You know, a lot of the studied actors who are going off after the really big, you know, car commercials and those big hits, they don't necessarily often want to do that medical stuff. So you can wind up in a position where you have a skill set at something that is a little bit more nitty gritty, but can become a nice long-term income. So absolutely taking a class is an excellent idea, especially if you want to have that be a primary focus. Yeah.
Definitely. No, again, great answer there. So just looking here, sorry, I had a good question that I've just lost in here. I know the gist of it, so sorry, I can't find it, so I didn't say who it was coming from. But with that, how do you keep your voice from getting strained during really long-term, you know, whether it's e-learnings or audiobooks during long-term recordings? And what would be your advice on kind of keeping your voice in prime condition there throughout the recording?
Yep. So if you knew me, you would find there are times when at the end of the week or the end of the day, my voice is raspier than it is right now. That 7,000 word document that I did, the entire document is more raspy and a little bit lower pitched than I am right now. And so when I go back, I have to go back to that sample and make a note of it, that's how I want to redo it. Because when you are doing this kind of work, at some point, there's a breaking point where your voice can only take so much. That being said, I have never lost my voice. I've never had any vocal damage. Every single day, I wake up and warm up without fail. That happens. I shut the window and I sing the scales. E. I do that every single day, and I use my breath support. Then when I come to do a voiceover job, there are a couple things that happen. I take a nice deep diaphragmatic breath every single time. I lift my soft palate so the air is going through and keeping the flow going through in a nice, strong way. And I also do a read ahead technique, which is not related to sustaining my voice, except that it helps me to make a lot less mistakes because I'm reading a couple words ahead of where I am. So that way I am using my voice a lot less. If you were to see me on my mic after a couple hours, you would see this because I'm trying to manufacture the sound of a lift by using my facial structure. So that's something, those are some techniques that I use to maintain my voice. And the other thing to keep in mind, audiobook narration and e-learning's big things. When you get those jobs or you're quoting them out, my suggestion is booking out a couple extra days that are longer than what you think you're going to need. This way you can pace yourself because sometimes things take a lot longer than you expect and you really don't want to be on the mic for more than a couple hours if you can avoid it. Sometimes people do better also in the morning. So you might be a person who wants to narrate in the morning because your voice is stronger, you know, stay hydrated as we talked about before, and don't drink cold things with ice. That's the other thing I will say that constricts your vocal cords. So warm water is a better tip for that.
Awesome. And I know even, you know, staying hydrated, I knew is something, you know, very important, but I never actually thought about the ice thing there is, you know, very interesting, very interesting feedback there and appreciate, as always, great answer there. One that came up, again, I'm missing the name here, but how do you describe differing from, you know, conversational read is very, very prominent in the industry and a lot of people are looking for that, but that's more commercial work. Do you find that reads still being interpreted in your e-learning and
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, I don't find it to be more in commercial work. I think that might be a little bit of a myth. It may be in the auditions. I am not out there auditioning all the time, so I don't know. I can tell you that in my client work, 55, 60% of the time, it's not that they want like the same kind of a commercial, like buzzy, script popping kind of a read. But what they don't want is it to be rigid. Sometimes they do. It's more casual, professional. If you think about, this is how I look at it. In today's environment, we have Jeans Friday, right? Or everybody wears jeans. Like this is before COVID. Everyone's going in casual day, right? Where you can be kind of casual and go in on that. Or they might, a lot of the new businesses have ping pong tables or stuff. They've got places where you can eat that are on site to create a sense of hominess and comfort. I think the voice acting kind of mimics that in the sense of casual conversational. And I think it's a mistake to go directly into professional. You still want to be professional, but professional with an edge of, I get you, kind of. I understand you. Unless they want authoritative, which does happen. There is often authoritative professional, and they'll tell you when they want that.
Yep. No, that's perfect. So to kind of recap, you think kind of more that professional mixed with kind of a casual conversational.
I think a good portion of the time, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Now, I know we are 5 minutes too, so I think that's where we're going to be wrapping up. Again, I want to say thank you to everybody who has joined, everybody who tuned in today. I want to say a big thanks for Rachel for taking the time to be with us today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
Anytime. It was great doing this with you. I will repeat once more, guys, you will get a recording of this about 24 hours from now. It will be a link, so keep an eye out for that. And any questions that we did not get to, I apologize. We are on a time constraint there, but feel free to reach out to Rachel. And if Rachel, you want to repeat your website and email one more time, that'd be great.
Yep. It's rachelalena.com. And my email address is rachel@bite studio.com.
Awesome. Alrighty. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you all have a great day and a great rest of your week. And as always, nice to see you, Rachel. And
thank you for everything.
Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Take care now.
Anytime. You as well.
Okay, bye-bye.